So it has been a year since the, general election. And one of the, of course, interesting things that, of course, happened during the general election was, of course, Nigel Farage getting elected. And I always said since moment one, it is very, very likely he is a one-term MP. And there were lots of doubts. There was lots of, oh, maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right, whatever. But my primary basis for all this is that this has happened before, right? And it is all to do with the fact that MPs, the more active they are in a local community, the more likely they are to be re-elected. Take, for example, the case of Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson, at one point when he was in the Conservatives, was probably going to lose his Ashfield seat at one point. Then, of course, he left, went to Reform, and you notice he seemed to have basically almost disappeared at one point from like 2024. It was it was kind of weird. He almost like just disappeared completely from view. However, that was because he was busy in his constituency trying to rebuild his local profile, like trying to get back out there and re-win his constituents' vote. And he actually managed to do it. Hence why he re-won his seat. And then you're going to look at other figures like George Galloway, who, once they left the Labour Party and did their own party, look at how Galloway lost his seat in Bradford. Galloway lost his seat in Bradford because locals just became fed up of the fact that Galloway kept on ignoring them, not doing any surgeries, really didn't represent the city at all, and eventually was absolutely ousted by a community-based effort to get rid of him. And I think now, as what we will see here, you can see the very same thing happening to Nigel Farage. So this is interesting, and I think this will definitely bear a lot of scrutiny, especially in the light that two recent by-elections just happened for local councils, and of course they were initially won by Reform, but when Reform were defending them, they lost. And they didn't come like a close second or even second place. They came in third place. That's how far they slipped down in those elections. So, for all the talk about Reform winning and this and that, as I've said, turns out when people actually see who these people are when they're in power, how they act, they're not that eager to put these people into a serious position of power. So, before we do get into this, please do remember to click the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there's the Patreon page, there's the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership button down below as well. So thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel. Now, on with this, because I think this is a very interesting piece, and I think very, very well done as well. This comes from The Mirror with the title of I Needed Help from My Local MP, but it's Nigel Farage, and he's nowhere to be seen. Today now marks a year since the election of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage to Parliament. And the reporter Ross Wayne Jones visits now Clacton-on-Sea to speak with its residents, wondering where he's been. So, when Carla contacted a local MP after fleeing a violently abusive partner, she was desperate for help. She said, I've been now in several temporary homes after fleeing domestic violence. The support worker from Clacton says, it's meant now sharing a room with my 10-year-old daughter and 14-year-old son. I emailed my MP, Nigel Farage, for several times without a reply. A few months later, she received a response, but said that my issue still wasn't resolved. And we were so isolated, she said. I was suffering from agoraphobia. I wouldn't leave my home unless I had to. In desperation, she now turned to the local Labour Party for advice. Just 2 months later, she was then offered a permanent home. Bear that in mind, that she had to turn to a completely different party that was not in power in that area, was not even their MP, and they actually did something. And this is something the local Labour Party is actively doing in that area, because it's the exact same strategy they did to get rid of Galloway. Anyway, it continues. The turnaround now for Clara has been very dramatic. I've now been in my new home for just over a month. My mental health has already improved, she says. I go outside now every day. My children now have a bedroom each of their own and are thriving. This Friday, of course, marks exactly 1 year since the election of Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform UK, to Parliament, with only 1 of 5 seats won now by the insurgent far-right party. On the 4th of July 2024, after very 7 unsuccessful failed attempts, Farage actually finally secured a parliamentary seat. But since then, constituents could not be forgiven for thinking Farage has been elected MP for Mar-a-Lago, not Clacton-on-Sea. Within a fortnight, the man who once asked, "Do I want to spend every Friday for the next 5 years in Clacton?" had jetted off to the United States to say hello to President Donald Trump. In total, he has made at least 8 trips to the US, but not held one single surgery for constituents. Primary thing MPs are meant to do: hold surgeries so that they can speak with their constituents, so constituents can come to their MPs with issues. Hasn't held a single surgery. I am very, very likely to say, I think, just on this alone, constituents will turn around and go, why on earth should we elect Nigel Farage? In fact, it would not surprise me if Nigel maybe moves seats next time. I would not be surprised to see that. So the campaign group Hope Not Hate says that in the past year alone, the Reform leader has now spoken for just 45 times in Parliament, fewer than any other leader with a seat in Westminster. Tory leader Kimmy Baddock has spoken 226 times. Farage, of course, failed to show up for several key votes on renters' rights, winter fuel allowance, and even a debate on the government's post-Brexit negotiations. Then, where is he on all these things? He's not interested in being an MP. Walking just alongside the beach in Jaywick, the burnt-out buildings are very still visible, along now with a metal girdering. But residents now tell me it took their MP a week to visit the scene of a devastating blaze there. In contrast, a local community now pulled together to set up refugees after now a fire on the beachway on the 8th of August now left 3 homes destroyed and 7 other damages, with 8 fire crews now working for hours to now tackle the flames. Julie Coleman is now at a sewing machine in Julie's Alterations, where the net curtains are now shortened for £12. Wearing now a tiara that sparkles in a heat wave, she said, "We had a lot of hope for Nigel," the 98-year-old says. "To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of change since the election. I know he's been in America." Again, there wasn't going to be any change, to be honest. But again, this is one of the things that Nigel constantly does. He builds up this hope, this sense of hope for people who have felt neglected, felt abandoned. And that's what he's constantly preyed on. That's what he's managed to tap into. It's what he did during the Brexit referendum. It's what he's done since. But when you are an MP and you're not doing anything, it becomes very, very hard to defend that hope, that reason for voting for him. But it continues. Nikki Barthay, 35, said she'd now like to talk to MP about fly tipping and now life-saving rings because there are still no lifeguards on the beach here. Rachel Richards, 38, runs a school shopwear uniform. And she said, He's not engaged with any or local businesses. She says he's her MP, but she's never seen him. As the mother of a child with additional needs, she is very unimpressed with the Reform leader, has now claimed that GPs are now overdiagnosing mental health problems and special educational needs. Elaine Lacey, 64, a fundraising charity bike rider in memoriam of her son, Greg, the father of two now battle mental health issues, alcohol addiction and homelessness. He was waiting now for rehab when he died, aged 38. Elaine says addiction issues in the community needs now local MP support. And I am so fed up with politicians, she says. I was excited now for Nigel, but when I saw he's now got all over these second jobs, I'll keep fighting. I can help just one person not go to the depths my son went to. It'll all be worth it. And again, this is something other MPs do. Like, they get involved in these community campaigns and they give it a heck of a lot of boost. If you can get an MP on like a local community campaign or to bring up issues, you can get a lot of support doing that. So it continues. The man, of course, of the people, the Reform leader, now so far is now the highest earning MP just of this year. The Parliamentary Register of Interest show he has spent more than 800 hours outside parliamentary employment since being elected. Back in April, 9 Jobs Nigel got the 10th job, earning him over £25,000 as a commentator now for Rupert Murdoch's Sky News Australia. Other roles include a £2,800 job advertising gold bullion. In total, he's now approaching £900,000 in outside earnings. Yeah. One thing I would love to see to absolutely torpedo Farage is Labour should really just row in on completely canning second jobs for MPs. Completely. Like, you cannot take on a second job. You're an MP, and that is it. And I think that is what they should do. However, I do think there should be some special remits because you can, for example, some MPs do sit on charity boards and things like that in volunteer roles where they don't get paid. I think stuff like that MPs should absolutely be allowed to do because they can bring a lot of gravitas to those things. They can bring a lot of attention to those roles with their just them being, having those 2 little letters in front of their name, MP so and so. Anyway, let's continue on this. So, of course, in contrast, now all across his constituency, we find people now working tirelessly to make Clacton great again. Dr. Karen Dennis came home to Clacton now to try and make a difference. Despite battling a series of close bereavements, she has now converted an old tire centre into a shop, Ketchup Clothes, where she now sells clothes made now from old tents left on the beach and runs community events and workshops. When Farage was elected, I will admit I initially wanted to get out, she says. I felt we were all just now pawns in his game, but I'm staying because this is a very special place. Local Labour activist Martin Sucker and councillor Peter Coles have now shown me where the new library will be built, and with money now secured by the Labour government. The new walkway that will now link the town with the seafront. Along the streets, the new banners now read, Love Clacton. We're doing a lot of exciting things here, Coles says, but our MP hasn't been now to a single meeting of the town board. Apart from looking now for photo opportunity, the honest answer, he's done nothing. So he's not even meeting with the town council. Again, something MPs are expected to do. Even, and I will say this now, there are a lot of Conservative MPs, as we talked about, that got in 2019 that run those red wall seats. At least they engaged. At least a lot of them did try and engage with their, local council. Miriam Cates, as much as I loathe the woman, she actually did attend some Penistone Town Council meetings and even a Barnsley one on the odd occasion. But Nigel Farage, not even done that. So a spokesperson now for Nigel Farage said the MP for Clacton has set up his first Clacton business surgery and helped raise over £15,000 for a local charity, Sandy's Farm, and now held advice surgeries for elderly residents who are now losing their winter fuel allowance. He also writes now a weekly column for the local paper. Oh, I've got to try and find that. I really got to try and find that. He added, of course, Nigel is the manager of a team in a charity football day of this weekend now in Clacton. Perhaps the mayor would like to come along and see how popular he is in the local community. The sense of things here that has gone very wrong in places like Jaywick is all part of why some people voted for reform. This is why the area now desperately needs now an active champion in Parliament. There is a lot of extreme deprivation in parts of Jaywick, explains Karen Craven, the CEO of Active Wellbeing Society, which runs now a cycling project and a subsidized bistro where kids can eat free, which transforms lives in the area. Parts now are like a shanty town. That is not now to stigmatize them. It is to say that people are now living in conditions that are really unacceptable. There are people living now as permanent residents in caravan parks. Many were now sent there as temporary accommodation, but they've little hope of leaving. Sometimes people end up now living on the beach, and there are residents experiencing child hunger and period poverty. AOS Orange, the Essex pedal power bikes now free to borrow below the breadline, can now be seen rattling along the new solar lit path from Jaywick to Clacton. Talking to people working in that area on the local bus routes that didn't serve the early shift at Asda, they were saying that there are now systemic issues, but this is also an area that has been stigmatized. And that has now had effect on aspirations and perceptions, Craven says. This is what we are now trying to start to change. With now polling predicting that Nigel Farage's party could win 377 seats at the next election, there are still a lot of lessons in Clacton for voters hearing reform's siren call. Craven compares the party's appeal with a world-conquering American brand. Reform now is oversimplistic, vague, and emotional appeal like Coca-Cola, he says. But in the end, a place like this needs real solutions. So bear in mind, this again is not happening. Nigel Farage can claim he's doing all this wonderful stuff, but he's not. He's not, though. And we have seen, and there are numerous examples. Again, I mentioned the George Galloway one numerous times that have happened. The whole reason Jeremy Corbyn has been an MP for so long, and still is one, even though he's an independent now, is because he has a very wide community support in that area. Maybe not as once as strong as it was, but it's still there. Why did Caroline Lucas get into Brighton Pavilion so big? Because she was a big player in the local community. She used her status as an MP very, very well. Now, what will happen? Ultimately, Farage can try and do bits here and there, but eventually you've got to actually come up with real practical solutions to help these people. You've got to be able to champion these people. And eventually those people are going to turn around and go, he's not the biggest champion. And right there, you see that article. They went out and talked to those people who were like, yeah, we were really excited about Nigel to begin with, but no one's seen him. You know, he's not been holding any surgeries, but oh, don't worry, there's a surgery coming all of a sudden. I'm sure there is. But yeah, I didn't know he was writing a weekly advice column. That is something we're going to have to try and track down to see what's going on there. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.